Om Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Param Param Ishvaro Guratmeti Murti Veda Vibhagine Vyomapta Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Sava Vedanta Sedanta Gocharam Tamagocharam Govindam Paramanandam Satguru Pranatoshmaham Om Om Shanti 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 Om Namaste. Welcome to our Panchadasi class. We begin today. Did you locate yourself, Elizabeth? Are you on the page? The same page as we say, as the expression says?
Same page.
Same page. And you, Mark? There can be no doubt that oneself exists as consciousness. So the verse 23rd, there can be no doubt that oneself exists as consciousness. Awareness is another name, is synonymous of consciousness. I tend to like better the word consciousness because awareness is often associated to attention, you understand? And I like the word consciousness because it brings the fact that that consciousness is something very close to what we experience as human consciousness, which is the I, the self. So some will say, but it's better to avoid consciousness because people confuse consciousness with the mind. But we are here to establish that the mind is consciousness as well. So I like to bring them, like consciousness is the chit aspect of Brahman, the conscious aspect of Brahman, which is experienced in duality as aham in the Jivatma, in the I thought. There can be no doubt that oneself exists as consciousness. So we have no doubt about that. When we say, I myself, not the self. Now the self goes to the I myself. There can be no doubt that oneself exists as what? As consciousness, as knowledge, as knowingness, as that by which I know I exist. Let me change here because it's going off again and again. Okay, I'm beginning slowly today, but we're going to speed up and do some extra time. There can be no doubt that one's self, that one's very existence says, I am, I exist. There can be no doubt that this aham exists as a conscious being, as consciousness, right? So if I am not conscious, I will have certain doubts in respect to my existence. Actually, if I'm not conscious, I'm going to be totally ignorant in respect to my own existence, which is the case with the inert beings, the inert creatures, the inert objects produced by Maya. They exist, but they are not conscious. They don't experience that I am, I exist. Therefore, they can never be aware of their existence as consciousness. There can be no doubt that I myself exist as consciousness. If there was no consciousness, how could anyone deny the existence of existence, consciousness, awareness? So if there was no consciousness to begin with, how could anyone deny the existence of awareness or consciousness? So this goes to the objector, of course, the one who is somehow trying to doubt the existence and the experience of consciousness as the base or the substratum or the factor always present in each and all knowledge and experience and knowledge we have, right? So we know that consciousness must be there. But for some people, this concept is a little bit difficult. How can I understand consciousness? Okay. And so if it's not an object that I can say it is this or it is that. So if it's not something that can be seen as this or that, some people have a lot of trouble, and then they try to negate the existence of consciousness. Are you okay, Elizabeth?
There was extra noise, but it's gone now.
Yeah,
sorry.
It was a small plane going by here.
Oh,
Have your volume up, Elizabeth.
yes.
So this goes to the deniers, to the ones that object the existence of consciousness. And then how can there can be no doubt of the presence of consciousness if you exist. If I exist as a conscious being, and then consciousness is proving itself by my very existence, okay? Because if there was no consciousness, I would not be even able to begin with to doubt the presence of consciousness. I can only doubt the presence of this all-pervasive, never not present existence, consciousness. I can only doubt or negate or object the presence of that as a conscious existing being, right? If there is no consciousness, who would be able to deny its very existence as consciousness? You need to be conscious to deny your existence as consciousness, right? It is an impossibility, as we know. A scripture says that only tamasic people claim they don't exist. Of course, one has to be very, very tamasic. Here they call fools, or people with a dull mind. So scripture says that only fools claim that they do not exist, okay? So we could go to the extreme to say only crazy people can say, I do not exist. But surprisingly or not, there are some spiritual groups that go about saying that I don't exist, you do not exist, nothing exists, which is an impossibility because you have to exist to say that nothing exists, right? It's absurd. But we know those guys, more or less, from hearsay. If you believe that consciousness does not exist, and then you do not exist. Well, if you believe that consciousness does not exist, it means nothing exists, therefore you don't exist. The self cannot be an object of knowledge, much less of experience, but you cannot doubt that you exist. So now, we are in these two, three verses, we are establishing that the self cannot be objectified, but you cannot doubt that you exist. So we are talking about consciousness, two features or natures of Brahman. We can say that consciousness cannot be objectified. Awareness cannot be objectified because it is the absolute objectifier, the subject, the knower, the experiencer. So this consciousness cannot be an object of knowledge, but you cannot doubt that you exist. Of course, the self, why it was used the word self? Because this consciousness, it shines as the I sought, the aham, the self, I myself. The self cannot be an object of knowledge. Okay, I accept that. So I'm the knower, I cannot be reduced to an object of knowledge, okay? But yet, I cannot doubt that I exist. So at least we are coming to a conclusion that the existence of the one denying the presence of consciousness cannot be negated as its very existence. So the question is, I accept that I exist, but how about I accept that I am free, limitless consciousness? It's a little bit more difficult, huh? So unless we mix up, we confuse consciousness with the mind, and then we take the self or consciousness to be the mind. And then, no, I know, I am a thinking phenomenon, I am the mind, and so on. No, we are talking about consciousness, awareness, and existence. So the doubter, the objector cannot doubt its existence, but it is still doubting its nature as consciousness, pure limitless consciousness. Huh? So at least that we have established. Now the next step is what? Is to understand that I exist as limitless consciousness. Okay? So now I understood that I exist at all times, even when I'm in deep sleep, even between incarnations, between births. But now I have to equate my existence with consciousness itself in its limitless Ananda nature. So the existence of the I is easy to be established because we superimpose the body, which is the Sat element of Brahman. We superimpose the body to the I, to the existence of this, the I, the Aham. And then we accept that, no, I know that I exist. Why? Because I'm taking the body, which I see objectively, to be the self, right? So I don't have any problem. So the next step is to understand that I exist as consciousness, as we know, and then there will be some trouble there because there is confusion between the mind and consciousness. The mind is limited. Consciousness is limitless. So we established them that I not only I exist, but I exist as consciousness. And then the third element should be cleared, is this confusion between the limited nature of human consciousness and the unlimited nature of human consciousness as pure, limitless consciousness, which is not the mind, which is not the intellect, okay? So Ananda is the third feature that needs to be understood. That's what we say, that most people in Vedanta, they get to have the two-third enlightenment. They know that they exist. They know that they are consciousness. They are still confusing consciousness with the mind. Therefore, they have a hard time to understand that it is Ananta, limitless by nature, because consciousness, not being the mind, it is one and without a second. It's non-dual. It's non-dual. It's the only reality. It's Sat-Chit, existence consciousness. Anything else about this verse? Anything not clear? The next verse. If you ask what the self is, we reply that the self cannot be described as being this or that. So take the self as your true nature. And then the guy says, why? Because there is no other option. So it is a very, very nice point that's made there. So anything in the world can be described as this and that. So we use the word this when things are at close proximity. Therefore, things are captured by the five senses. And then when it is there, that, this and that, you are that Devadatta, that which is no longer present, but it was before, but we can infer, okay? So that can be inferred. It's not really this because it's not accessible by the five senses, but it's that can be inferred by the mind. So anything in the world is about this or that, okay? And the self will never be described as this or that because it's not an object of perception and it's not an object of inference, okay? Knowledge, okay? So the self is never going to be seen as this or that. So then how are we going to find out where is this self? If everything in the world is divided in these two categories of objects of perception and objects of inference, this or that, and then where is the self? Where is the self? There is only one other option. You are the self. You looking for the self in this or that, you are the self, right? It's very, very simple, very, very beautifully put. Take the self to be your true nature because that is the only other option. This conscious existence is not seen as anything like perceived by the sense or perceived by the mind. And what is the other option so that I can know the self as my own self? It's the only other option left, okay? It's the nature. Take it to be your true nature because there is no other option. And then you can say like, but no, the self may be the mind. The mind sees this and the mind infers that. Therefore, I believe that the self is the mind. And then we have to come and play the usual trick. Who knows this mind? Okay, how? By which means this mind is known? You're saying that the mind is the self. So who knows that the mind is the self? How is the mind known? It's known by what? By your true nature as consciousness, of course. So take yourself not to be this, not to be that, and the mind is a subtle object, okay? It's perceived as by the intellect, let's say, but the mind in its self-reflection faculty. So take the self to be your true nature because there is no other option. There is a commentary here that says there is a silly modern teaching that attempts to identify a particular experience, a feeling of wholeness and oneness as moksha. So let's call it as the self, okay? So I was there, I have been there, I have done there around Papaji especially. A lot of those epiphanies or experience being said to be the self. But as we know, the self does never come and go. The self is that revealing everything that comes and goes, come and go. So no experience of expansion, of non-duality, of wholeness, oneness, or whatever, silence, peace. None of these experiences can be the self, okay? So the self is none of these subtle, mystical, or spiritual objects of experience. But there is a certain tendency out there, at least a few decades ago, that you should look into these epiphanies, this experience, and then the teacher would go and listen to the student. The student would sit and say, oh, I had an experience of the self, and it was wonderful. It was like this, like this, like this, and like this, and like that. And Ramji tends to call it spiritual pornography. So the teacher would go, the student would tell everything about, oh, it was this experience, that experience, that experience. And sometimes the teacher would say, this is it. So this is it. You had a wonderful experience. On those days, I used to go and look into the teachers, how you say, profile, not profile, resume, or I forgot another word. Biography, to see, to see how did he get enlightened, And then in the biographies, almost invariably, it says, oh, it was wonderful. I became self-realized. I meet myself when this thing happened and that thing happened. And then I was becoming this and becoming that. So all this big, spectacular experience. Okay. And I used to look into that and say, wow, this is a big guy. He has 3 pages of his enlightenment explaining how he met the self. Okay. So, and then the people go to the teacher, and the teacher is going to say, yes, that was the self, okay? That was the self. This is it. You have been there. And sometimes you will say, oh, you have been there with the self and you missed it. You said you have been in contact with it. You have experienced that. How long ago? Oh, it was 5 years ago. Yes, you have been there experiencing the self. This was it, but you missed it. Missed how? You should hug and kiss it and never let go of it. That's how Papaji used to put it to us. Okay, so all duality, all you and the self is something that can be said, this is it. Is that experience you have, or this experience you're having right now. And never people would tell the self is that, always ever present as the light of consciousness, illumining and revealing this and that. Whatsoever experience, it happens within the scope of the self, of consciousness, okay? Consciousness is never not present, right? So when the teacher gets the student's mind in a scientific state, and it's experienced, so the teacher does not get any student's mind in a scientific state, usually. There is this concept that the teacher has certain Shakti that's going to establish the mind of the group in a scientific state. My experience is that this is more like a collective phenomenon that happens, although some gurus have more Shaktipati, as we know. Yeah? But the students might become sattvic in a very sattvic environment, such as a satsang, experiential satsang environment, okay? And then everybody experience that pure, reflective, conscious mind, And then we call it the reflection of the self in a sattvic mirror-like reflector, yeah? And then the individual say, oh, I got it. And then the teacher will say, got what? Oh, I felt like this and like that. This is it, okay? So what the teacher should be saying is that this is not it, you are it. Yeah? The one who observes this is the it that you are looking for. Yeah? So these are good tricks, huh? Claudio, you are becoming a guru. You have to know this and just break, right? You just cut to the chase and immediately, reveal what is the self. Is that in which all this so-called self-experience take place. And then to complete the teaching, the guru should say, it is you. The self is it, and this it is you. All experience-based teachings do not take the experiencer into account. All experience-based teachings do not take the experiencer into account. Here it was said that it does not take the experience to be an object, but incorrectly assume the experience as the subject. Yeah, can be said that way as well. All experience-based teachings does not take, usually never takes consciousness into account, okay? All experience-based teachings do not take consciousness into account. What it takes is the experiencing agent and the experienced object, okay? And then there is the experiencer entity, the jiva, having an experience, subtle, spiritual, mystical experience, okay? And they oversee the consciousness. They don't take into account that which is the real self, that which the experiencer is searching, seeking for, it's discounted consciousness, that by which the experiencer is an experiencing entity and is searching for the self. So all experience-based teachings do not take this consciousness, which is the real it, into account, okay? And then it takes the experiencer to be, the subject, and those epiphanies to be the self, which is even worse. Anything else about this passage here? Any commentaries? The following verse, an object which the sense perceive is said to be like this. An object which is beyond the range of sense perception is said to be like that. That which is the subject cannot be an object of the sense. So we have the objects that are seen as this or that, but that which is the subject cannot be an object of the sense, neither of the mind. But as it is the very self of everyone, it cannot be said to be beyond the realm of experience and knowledge. This is a very nice verse because it brings the knowledge experience element, because we all want to have this knowledge, and this knowledge needs to be translated to experience, in the sense that this knowledge must change or improve my experience of myself and my experience of the world. So the experience and knowledge element, it must be present in self-knowledge. So self-knowledge is knowledge, therefore it's knowledge of the self, and this knowledge of the self is more easily understood for those who understands Vedanta, okay? But when we talk of experience, because every and all experience is permeated by the light of consciousness, the light of the self, okay? So, but as it is the very self, the self is not an object, can never be seen as this or that, okay? But as the self is the very self of everyone, is the very consciousness of everyone, this consciousness cannot be said beyond the realm of experience and knowledge. It must be within the realm of experience and knowledge. We cannot experience and know without the grace of conscious existence of the self. The self is never beyond the realm of mithya, the realm of duality, the realm of experience and knowledge. It's only here in duality that we know the subject, Jiva Atma, knows the other object, and the self is always ever present. It's never really beyond. We say beyond, 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 but the self is the most ordinary thing, as James likes to put. And it cannot be said to be beyond the realm of experience, because it is the substratum, which is that by which experience takes place, or that by which consciousness have an experience, or experience becomes possible by the grace of consciousness. So this consciousness is never beyond the realm of experience and knowledge. Okay, we experience things and we know things, and then this and that are objective knowledge, objects of knowledge. So we see these, and then we know that I experience and I know this and that. The self is never present as this and that, but it's never absent. It can never be said not to be present in the realm of everything that we experience and know. The self is there as the chit aspect or feature of Brahman, okay? Is the consciousness aspect or feature of Brahman, that which allows Ishvara, pure sattva, to infuse the human intellect with this sattva guna, which allows us to know our environment, ourself, and ultimately our true nature. Both this and that are not the self, as we know, anatma, mithya. And the self is that which is, if infusing, let's say, this and that with conscious existence, okay? If it is a sentient object, it's being infused by conscious existence. If it is an inert object, it's being infused by existence, by the sat aspect. So the self is always present, conceding its conscious existence to all these and that's of the universe, okay? It's never not present. Therefore, it is never outside of the realm of experience and knowledge. This may appear to be a little bit contradictory, but it's not. It's never not present, although it's not among these and that objects. Okay, it's always present as the light of the illuminator, revealing all these and that's in the universe. Is that clear for everyone? I know you all know that we just like, this is like music for us. So I already mailed the enlightenment certificate. So you don't need to come back, but since we like this music better than any other, we keep getting back together again and again. Okay, the next verse unfolds the fourth feature of the self. We know that the self has three features. We always present the self as Satchitananda, Brahman as Satchitananda, existence, consciousness, and Ananta, limitlessness, one without a second, the non-dual Sat-Chit, the non-dual Brahman. So we know that there are three features for consciousness. In some other expositions, we present the self with 5, 6, 7 features, even, all pervasiveness and not not a product or a part, or a partless whole, or not a byproduct of media, or so on. So there are many ways we present the self. Now, by present features, fundamentally, the self is present by its nature, and the natures of the self are Satchitananda, existence, consciousness, and Ananta, limitlessness. Those are the nature of the self. Okay, but there are some more aspects or features to it. And here it is going to be unfold something which is said to be the fourth feature. You see, it's called the fourth feature. It did not say the fourth nature of the self. Satchitananda, the nature of the self. But there are more features to the self. The verse 28, such it cannot become an object of knowledge. The self is experienced directly. How nice, huh? There we go. We go with a paroksha yana. But here, I love when they do that. Here is say the self is known directly. Here, the author went to the extreme to say that the self is experienced directly. Okay? So, but the self cannot be experienced. Yes and no. It cannot be experienced as an object, but it can be experienced directly as the knower. Okay? As the experiencer, the nature of the experience, the nature, the true nature of the knower. Such it cannot become an object of knowledge and experience. The self is known and experienced directly. Okay, so what kind of knowledge or experience can be a direct one? What kind of knowledge and experience can be a direct one? So every knowledge and experience involves duality, the knower and the known. What kind of knowledge / experience can be gained directly? It's a knowledge which does not involve the knower and the known. It involves only the knower contemplating on its true nature until it becomes clear, directly known and experienced one's true nature, in my absolute true nature as the knower, okay? Which is not the intellect, which is not the mind, which is not the 5 koshas, which is not my different levels of experience, okay? Though it cannot become an object of knowledge and experience, the self is known and experienced directly. So it must be what? Self-knowing. It must be self-revealing, because any knowledge requires the knower, the known, and a means of knowledge, okay? So we need to know mathematics. So we need to have the students, which is going to become a knower, and then the object of knowledge, which is math, and then a means of knowledge, which is a class, from different stage, in which I develop mathematic knowledge, okay? So, but the self is self-revealing, it's self-knowing, it's this knowledge is self-luminous, it's self-existing in the self as the self. So it must be self-knowing, self-revealing. It's directly known. And how relevant is this? This is only relevant when we bring the Jiva-Atma into account, of course, because the Jiva-Atma is the one who is confused about its nature, takes itself to be the 5 koshas, or the 3 bodies, or the mind, and so on. No? And then the self appearing as the Jiva-Atma, being a little bit confused about its true nature, its true limitless nature. It needs to know the self, and then immediately it wants to know the self as this and that, okay? So it can only be known directly. What it means? It can only be known as the very nature of the inquirer. It can only be known as the very nature of the seeker, as the very nature of the one seeking self-knowledge. Okay, so what kind of knowledge is that? Is direct because it's my very nature. What kind of experience is that? Oh, it's a boring 24/7 experience that never leaves me. Even when this body dies, okay, this knowledge, this experience of my existing self remains. So it must be self-knowing, self-luminous, self-revealing. It does not really requires a means of knowledge, although when the Jiva Atma comes to the place, into the play, and then Ishwara looks at the situation and sees us, oh my God, so very, very few are realizing this direct knowledge. So very few. I think I need to help with these guys. And then let me reveal a special pramana to reveal the true nature of the Jiva Atma. The Jiva Atma is looking for fulfillment, looking for, reestablish its sense of ananda, of illimitation, limitlessness, and so on. And then Ishwara said that, let me reveal to them a means of knowledge. And the means of knowledge is the Upanishads, and it only works for rare individuals that have a very contemplative mind. So the self is existence, that which is satya. Yeah? It is consciousness. Consciousness is knowledge, pure knowledge, that by which knowledge comes into existence, knowingness. And it is a limitlessness, which is ananta. Those are the three nature of the self. So what is the fourth feature here? Okay, is that it is existence, it is consciousness, and it is limitless are the three natures of the self. And we're going to understand better as we go what the author here is referring to as the fourth feature of the self. So the next inquiry is, what is existence? Existence is what can never be dismissed. Abhadyam. Existence is what can never be dismissed. So how can we dismiss things? Okay, so it's very difficult to dismiss things. We can dismiss reality to phenomena, to things, but things itself, they are of the nature of existence itself and cannot be dismissed. Everything that exists, but we can dismiss the truth of certain things that exist here and there, like mithya, like a mirage. We can, in the light of the teachings, dismiss reality to everything we experience in duality, for example. But we cannot dismiss my very own existence. You cannot say, I do not exist. I can only say, I don't know I am consciousness. You cannot say, I don't exist. Only, I don't know I am awareness. How did I write it right? Did I interpret it correctly? You cannot say you don't exist. Only. I can only say, I think we covered this before. It's a bit confusing, this passage here. We were establishing that our existence can never be dismissed, okay? But yet I need to understand that I am awareness. So I cannot say that I don't exist. You cannot say you don't exist. Only, I don't know that I am awareness. So first it says you and then I. So I guess that the point here is that my existence is out of question. Okay, it cannot be dismissed. But I'm not clear that I am awareness, I am consciousness. If you have objects in a room, you can remove the objects, but not the space in which the objects exist. Okay, so now, now it becomes more clear. So we say that we cannot say that we do not exist, because I know that I exist. Okay, I identify with the physical body. I see the physical body, therefore I believe that I do exist. If I identify with my thought process on a subtle level, I say now my thought process do exist, therefore I exist. Okay, but it's a little bit more subtle to know that I am pure consciousness. Okay, I know that I exist, but I'm not sure that I am consciousness. And then the point here is, if we have objects in a room, including my physical body, okay, I see my body, I say, yes, I exist, because I superimpose my body on the I here. Huh? I exist, my body exists, and everything in this room exists, okay? But if you have all these objects, including my body, and you remove them, okay? If you have objects in a room, you can remove the object, but not the space in which the objects are accommodated. So in other words, I can remove anything, but I can never remove the consciousness by which, in which everything is known in the experience. Okay, that's the point. The point is, I know I can never say I don't exist. I'm not clear that I am awareness, I am consciousness, but the author here is coming to say, so you know all objects of the world. And if you know them, and then you can never dismiss the presence of your awareness, by which the presence of the object and the removal of the object are experienced and known. So the same concept. I'm turning this light. Any question about this introduction here, about this paragraph? It's very much aligned with what we have covered already. It's my existing aspect, my conscious aspect, and my conscious aspect is not the mind. My conscious aspect is consciousness or awareness, and awareness is always present, even when there are no objects to be illumined and revealed by this conscious awareness. No? The verse 29, existence is awareness, or existence is consciousness and cannot be negated. So now we're equating existence and consciousness, okay? So now I establish that I exist, and then on further inquiry, I establish that I exist as consciousness, because I need to be conscious in order to know that I exist at all times. So I'm re-equating consciousness and existence here. Existence and consciousness are synonymous. Existence is consciousness, and that cannot be negated. If consciousness, which is the witness of the changing, perishable world, if this consciousness would become changing consciousness or perishable consciousness, how would perishability be known? You cannot say that change and perishability happens without an unchanged and unperishable principle to witness it. So that's the point. So existence is consciousness. We have properly established that. This cannot be negated. if consciousness, which is unchanging, as the witnessing conscious principle, illumining and perceiving the world, if this consciousness, if the witness of the perishable world would be said to be perishable or changing, okay? So how would the changing and the perishable be known? So we can only know the changing phenomenon of the world against an unchanging background, okay? So if consciousness was the mind, and conscious in mind being a changing phenomenon, so we would have a hard time to witness and know the changing phenomenon. Why? And that explains our difficulty as knowing experience agents. The mind is always changing, the world is always changing, but we need something which is unchanging, and it's not bound by time, it's not perishable, that can perceive, the eternal universe, let's say. Okay, it comes and goes, it appears and disappears, but it's all the time there. So if consciousness, the witness of the changing world, would change, how will unchanging be known, the changeability of the world be known? You cannot say that change happens without an unchanging witness to it, okay? So that is a good logic that proves our nirvikara nature, okay? Consciousness does not change, because consciousness not changing is that by which we know what? We know the changing intellect, the changing mind, okay? And then this instrument of knowledge, which is the intellect, is going to, in turn, to know the world. It's going to know the world, to the best of its ability. But our goal here is not to know the world, is to know our very nature, which is nirvikara, never changing. Okay, so we want to contemplate our unchanging, unperishable nature as consciousness. Existence is consciousness, and that cannot be negated. If awareness, the witness of the perishable world, becomes perishable, how would be the perishable now? Not negated means that awareness never ceases to exist. Yeah. Existence is consciousness, and both can never be negated, because anything requires existence and consciousness, okay? Without which negation or not negation is not possible, okay? Awareness never ceases to exist, just as you cannot hear sound without a background of silence. This is very nice. You can only hear sounds if there is silence. More noise there is in the ambient, in the environment, less we can hear certain notes, let's say, and that goes to the metaphor of the self and its nature of ananda. Okay, if there are a lot of chasing and gaining small pleasures through the sense, this defect anandas that we gain through the sense organs and the body, the more we have this noise, okay, the less clear is the true ananda come from our nature as limitlessness. You remember the metaphor of the child in the how you say, in the core. Sure, how you say that in English? The children in the school, and then there are 200 children saying, you don't remember this metaphor?
The chorus.
Chorus. Yeah.
Chorus.
Chorus. Okay. So we have a chorus and the 200 children, and then the parents went there. I came to here to listen to my child. But then there were so many children singing the same, you know, in harmony with that that was not noticeable. So some scientists they want to hear the fragrance, or to feel the fragrance, or to experience the melody of the limitless self. But due to these small numbers we gain, you know, we create a noisy environment in which we can no longer identify this ananda, this natural ananda that comes from our true nature. You understand? It's a very beautiful analogy. Huh? Okay, I would say let's stop here. And then I will see how I did when I get up from this chair, to see if my back is hurting more or less. Because in one hand, Sattva Guna, I want to do it because Sattva Guna helps even in with the physical body. And I thought it was going to be good for me as well. But I will know soon. We meet again this coming Thursday with the Drisha Viveka. If any one of you have anything to say, do it now. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purna Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, my friends. Namaste. Arrivederci. Goodbye. And see you next time.
Thank you. Ciao.
Thank you. Ciao, ciao.
Thanks, Arlindo. Hope you feel better soon.
Yes, me too.
Yeah, thanks, Arlindo. Take it easy.
Thank
Bye
you.
now.
Bye-bye.